Welcome to Worlds Beyond. You're listening to Ronda Radio with Jared Walters, and today I'm interviewing Eileen and Collin Babb. Eileen is a accomplished author of how many books? 3 books now?
3 books.
3 books now. Collin is also used to be a was it crystal? He worked
Crystal
with
therapist.
Crystal therapist. I couldn't think of the word there. Crystal therapist, and now you're actually going into doing tarot and angel card readings as well. Now,
Readings and clairvoyance, basically. Yeah.
Excellent. I first met you, Eileen, at a psychic fair a couple of years ago, and you actually gave me a reading that really did give me the proverbial kick up the backside that I needed. So I really am excited to have you guys here today. It's really good, and it's been lovely talking to you for the last sort of half an hour, couple of hours or half an hour we've been here. Do you want to give us a little bit of a background about yourself, Eileen?
Right. Although I would have been involved with spirit and had spiritual experiences since a child, I didn't actually go into spirituality per se until I was older, and that's like a lot of mediums and people who work for spirit, because they bring up their families and unfortunately the material world encroaches. However, I went to Kenya just after my mother died, and the culture just resonated with me. How people could have so little and still be so happy. I came home and I said, I'd like to go back again. So we went to a travel agent, and that travel agent said to me, well, perhaps you've been there in a previous life. And I said, yeah, I quite believe that. So she said, why don't you come to our spiritualist centre? And I said, well, where is it? And she said, Little Mill. Well, I lived in Little Mill for the first 5 years of my life. So really I did a full circle to start on my pathway of spirituality. I took Colin with me, who was a total unbeliever at that time. And the medium that was there that night knocked his socks off, which made my life a bit easier, because I do believe, I'm a great believer in people sharing the same interests. About a month later I went back there, and this medium said to me, do you get thoughts running around your head at night? And I said, yeah, why don't you write them down? They said, even if it's just the cat sat on the mat, it means something to somebody. And I'd heard of clairvoyance and healing and things like that. Never really took much notice of inspired writing. So home I came and I said to Spirit, right, well, if you're so darn clever, tell me what you make of this. And I wrote 3 words, what is love, on a piece of paper, about 12 o'clock at night. And I wish I hadn't bothered, because 3 o'clock in the morning they had me up writing the answer.
They tend to do that, don't they? They will wake you up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and you will be there for the next hour.
It was just as if they were saying to me, Yabu sucks, there you are, see?
So what actually came out of that?
So I did a couple of books of poetry, and then one night I was led in bed minding my own business, drowsing as you do between wakefulness and sleep. And this voice came out of the blue saying, hello, my name's Silas and we're going to write a book together. So I looked all around the ceiling and thought, yeah, right, yeah, boo sucks, I'm just a housewife, what do you want with me? So anyway, I started on the book within a couple of weeks, and it took us 6 weeks from start to finish to write 60,000 words.
Bloody hell.
And I was absolutely exhausted, as you can tell, as you could realise. So I said to him, why didn't we go slower? And this voice said, did you ask? And the answer so the answer to that was no, I didn't. Because he's quite like that. He's elderly and, he's blunt and to the point, and he calls a spade a spade. But we did do the next 2 books slower, thankfully.
What was the first book? I meant to look up what the actual books were
Spiritual
called.
Food for Thought.
That's it, because I've got them upstairs.
Yeah.
I've read. I think I've read at least the 2 of them I've read.
Right.
So what happened from there on in then?
Well, it was published, and it was quite well received. The people at Powers That Be wanted me to get behind it and publish it and throw a lot of money at it. I don't believe in that. I'm one of these people that firmly believe that the people who are meant to read it will read it. And to be honest, we did make our money back, which encouraged me then to do the other 2. I do find it good because Silas sums up a philosopher as somebody with a train of thought, and then this train of thought either leads you down blind alleys or it comes together as a single thought. So we start here, perhaps say today, well, we're going to talk about recycling, or we're going to talk about politics, and we'll just go off on what I call his tangent, and I write down his thoughts. What I do find frustrating and a bit nerve-wracking actually is that he won't let me read anything. I mean, all right, I can read, say, My Psychic Life or Happy Medium or something like that, but I'm not allowed to read any in-depth books on spirituality whilst I'm writing, because he doesn't want my opinions to be influenced by others. So I do find that a bit daunting, because I'll put something down. He's never let me down, mind. I mean, but it's like writing blind. And then about, say, a couple of months later, after we've published something, I cut in the news about this, and you say, "Told you so."
It's mad, isn't it? Because about 2 weeks ago, we did an interview with Sam about what happened with the dog, and I said, we went through a phase. We still tend to do it now, but not as much, because just kind of the place in life where we are. And we went through a phase of writing everything down, and we both used to do channeled information from our guides. And I wrote this bit back in like August of last year. It was 27th of August, because I actually dated the recording, which I always date stamp the recording when I started. And I read out this sort of channeled bit of information. It just felt as if it just flowed out of me, and it made no sense. And on the video I said, there must be something wrong. It just does not make any sense to me at all. It's just gibberish. And I think I was a little bit more descriptive than that at the time. And when I listened back to it, because I don't listen back to any of the notes that we make, I kind of make it, and it's like it's there. If it needs to be referred back to, it'll find its way into my consciousness at some point when it's needed. But I just tend to put it down just for, if it ever needs to be remembered, or if it ever needs to be, drawn upon. And this meditation that we did, it was trying to sort of pinpoint what was actually going on with Sam at the time, and it just disseminated into discussion. It didn't go into a meditation, it was just a discussion. But everything that we said from that little channeled bit of information I did beforehand, and even the bits and pieces we were talking about later, made sense. Because reading it then, there was no way it could have made sense. It just did not seem. It just didn't seem plausible. It was just all weird, and do you find that like a lot sometimes when you're writing, you kind of think, does that really make? It doesn't make sense, and it, how does that work with you?
It's difficult because being human, you're always conscious of what you're writing, but on the other hand, I think it's very important to have complete faith and trust in your spirit guide. It takes time and effort. Silas always says, I don't work for him, I work with him, because we're indivisible. One can't function without the other. At one time, to start off, learning to trust was very difficult, because I also do trance mediumship, and I found it very difficult to totally let somebody have control of my body, and to be able to use as they would. I found that very hard, to be able to let go. Now, at one time I crept up more or less in the corner of my eye, and I was lodged there for quite a while, but now I can go off to some place and I come back and I think, oh, he's still talking, so I just drift off again. I just allow him total movement, total trust, and I trust him to be able to...
Do you only channel Silas then through trance?
Yes, at the present moment I haven't tried with this my new Egyptian guide, because, like I said, we've built up such a relationship now over 10 years, that I trust him. I trust him like I trust Colin, where it's absolutely implicit trust now, and that takes time to develop.
Yeah.
I've only been with Dottie, as I call him, for reasons that you'll find out if you read the book, a short while in time, and trust, as you know, with yourself, even with a human relationship, takes time to develop. Once you've lost it, you've lost a relationship.
Yeah, of course.
I think one of the biggest problems is, from man's point of view, man's perspective, that unless you can see it, smell it or touch it, it doesn't exist. And when I do readings or whatever I'm doing, clairvoyance for example, you very often go to people, well that they are very, very spiritual, but they would never admit it.
Yeah.
And I was the same, that following our holiday that we had, like Eileen said, and going to the church, going as a total skeptic on the face of it. And then I said that the medium that night turned my sort of life around totally, and then the biggest thing then was for a man was trying to accept it, and it took a long, long time before we did, and then we kept going back to the same church, and eventually we did run it for a little while, because the lady running wasn't had to go for operations and things, and gradually the same medium that was talking to Eileen about his writing and things told me to go and practice as a healer, because he could see this golden glow within me, and off I went and got training, but as eventually, like I said earlier in our conversations, I went from spiritual healing to crystal therapy, and as I said a prayer before and after the healing, the prayer afterwards got longer and longer and longer, and as I'm getting older and the knees are starting to go and I couldn't stand up for all that long, eventually I've turned away, not totally, but pretty well, from healing and going into clairvoyance, etc., etc. And it took me a long, long time to accept what I was given was what they wanted to give.
Yeah.
And the first church service I did in our own little church we were running at the time, I looked at this one woman, the only word that was placed in my mind was pastor. And I thought, pastor? What's all this about pastor? And I wasn't even giving messages at that time. I just wrote a whole load of things down. And I went to see her after and said, what's this about pastor? And she said, that's my staple diet. I've got so many allergies to different things. And we went all through the list. And it was 99.9% accurate. But
it's mad, isn't it?
But then you have to get that, eventually then learn to accept that what they give you, however mad it sounds, is true.
Because was it quite a, from what you said, it sounds like it was a huge transformation for you when all this started happening. So how did it feel, sort of going down, reflecting back on it now? Then how does it feel looking back on that sort of transformation that you actually went through back then?
Well, when you look back, you see that it's such a gradual thing that you have no preconceived ideas, and basically you can say, I want to be the best whatever in the world.
Yeah.
But if the spirit world don't want you to do that, they think you're better suited to do something else, then they would take you down that path without you realising it. They don't take you kicking and screaming, you know, and that's how they work on you.
I've noticed that because that's how it felt. Is every time I was doing readings, when I originally was doing readings, it was just gradually getting blocked. And I found that I've kind of gone down little tangents and things along the way, and I'm learning things, but it kind of not, I've not kind of got to that point, that's what I need to do. And it's weird, because do you find that sometimes they'll give you the end result and you've got to work your way to that? They'll show you something that's like a point in time, it's like, right, that's where you're going to be.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating as hell, because I had this one experience which has led me down this web design sort of path at the moment, because they showed me it starts with that, but I had to kind of accept over the last couple of days that it starts with that, it doesn't end with that. Do you know what I mean? And so see the progression as to where I was going, and it was so crazy. The vision was, I was in a conference and there were people I knew there, and then when I was in this conference we were all meeting, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there, and we were all discussing something to do with spirituality, and it was like we'd created something. It wasn't just me, I was a part of something else. There were people around me that I knew, and I kind of had, I know that spirit, with the concept of time, they'll give you kind of a rough guide or whatever to sort of appease you, but from my experience, spirit don't look at time, and I've noticed this with some of the people I've met as well who work more closely with this. They don't look at time the way that we look at time. But I kind of, for the point, I kind of had like 5 years or whatever, and it was going back. It was going back through time. The next bit was a conversation between Sam, myself, and a friend of ours, who also seemed to be a common thread in this series of images that I had. And he was saying, how do we stop people from sabotaging this idea or whatever it was that we had built? Because I didn't know what it was. I just knew it had some sort of significance to have a lot of people there. And we said about giving spirit a voice. It was about giving spirit a voice in this congregation of people, and it was huge. And I was going back then. I don't know if this was going forward or back, but I was canvassing for something, and it was so clear that it was crazy. And it comes back down to me doing this website, and it's like, it's got a bit confused at the moment because I'm not entirely sure how it kind of fits in. I'm kind of finding my little paths, and I'm not entirely sure where to put all the pieces together as of yet. But I'm kind of finding I'm having fun doing it, and that's where I kind of learned to sort of park what they've shown me, and kind of be open to the fact that if they show me an alternative, then sometimes I might have to go back and strip something away from what I originally constructed and try it a different way in order to learn something new. But every single time I do it, I'm learning something different. Do you kind of find this a very similar process with yourself?
I think basically if they will show you where you ought to be, or where they want you to be, very often if you want to go to the top of the mountain, you have to go on a zigzag path because you can't walk straight to it. But when you're doing the zigzag path, you're quite right, they will give you little bits of information, almost like a treasure map where you pick something up.
It is, isn't it?
And you carry it with you, and then they take it up the other way in a different path and give you a little bit more, and eventually when you get to the top of the mountain, all that treasure map goes together.
Makes sense.
That makes sense. But whilst you're going on that journey, you think, this can't be right, and that's where the doubt comes in, and that's where a lot of people fall down, because they then lose faith and trust. Yeah. And they really have to have that. I think you found this as well, haven't you?
Yes, I have, yes.
Mm-hmm.
found this when I went through my original sort of waking up process, or awakening to my gifts and stuff, that I was having so many crazy experiences, and this was like 5 years ago, and I didn't understand them until it was literally part of it was, so by the time I actually met Sam, it would all make sense to me. It was really strange, because the stuff that I went through, and I can look back through a series of choices, and if one of those choices I made a different choice, I might not have met her in the way in which I did. I still believe I would have met her, but things would have happened a lot really differently. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's really strange, the sort of influence and the way that they gently guide you then.
It's like two roads, isn't it? You can either take the short route or you take the long route. You'll get there eventually, but you know, you're offered choices within choices. Up to you. As I said, the pathway, you know, is short or long, depending on how, well, what, like you said, what choice you make, what influences are around at the moment in time.
I think they did this with me because, let's say, from the healing side, and then suddenly I started getting a lot of poetry coming to me. And I've probably written 150, 200 poems, and what I didn't realise at the time was they were probably preparing me for clairvoyance, because they were giving me words and things to say, you know, which made no sense to me whatsoever. But that is the path they chose. Now, over the last year, for example, I've probably written about 2 poems, and all the poetry I wrote was specifically for people who had problems, and it was an answer to help them. In the last 12 months, my clairvoyance is sort of flying, but my poetry slowed right down. It's like, you know, and that's the path they've taken me.
That's really crazy, because like the path they're sort of taking me on at the moment is more to do with people, like consciousness shift, people waking up, people sort of finding that spiritual connection within them, right? And that was common throughout near enough every single reading I did for the 2 years I was doing them on a regular basis. Everyone was going through this kind of weird sort of shift where things were changing inside them. They didn't know how. They were kind of thinking the questions: who am I? What does it all mean to be here? These sort of things. And a lot of the research I've been doing over the last year has been about society, how society is constructed, sociological sort of different things, and how sort of paranormal, spiritual and esoteric kind of fits into all of that. But when I wasn't even paying any attention to my gifts back in sort of 2004, 2005, I did go through a period where I wrote loads and loads of poetry. But it was all about, for me, it was all about society and how does, you know, like for example, why do some people have, it was all about the way society is constructed and how unfair the world is and that kind of thing, but not in a sort of pity me kind of way, but more in an inspirational kind of way. Do you know what I mean? As in like looking back at the, you know, the good things that our forefathers have done, and it was all sort of things that within the context. One of the ones we turned into a song. It's called Lost Path to Rotterdam, and we'd kind of started with this new customer. I ran a courier service at the time, and we'd forwarded his pallet using a different carrier we'd had a deal with, and he'd lost his pallet. And this guy, you know, it's his livelihood. And I was like, the poem was all about how can I, if I have to deal with organisations that have no integrity, how can I have integrity myself when I can't trust the organisations in which are supposed to be helping me because I'm helping them? Do you know what I mean? And it was all about integrity and trust in actually being able to work and fulfil the things that you want to do in life. It's just mad how that... Anyway, I talk too much.
Yeah, but don't you think, like in your that example, for example, you know, do you not think that very often we take too much at face value? And I often say to people if I'm reading, like, you know, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we do take face value sometimes, and sometimes it's better to stick with what you know. than take a flyer on something else. You know, well, it might take you longer to get there, but eventually you will get there. You know,
because the amount of stuff that, as you say, you kind of learn, and I've learned how to do, it's been really, really wide array of different things I've learned over the last. And it has felt like as if they wanted me to take time out to sort of just really research and find out, find my footing and find out not what I was being spoon fed, but what actually I think about different subjects and different things.
I think they probably had to steer their mind. This is the thing. If they give you enough string to play with, eventually you get fed up with playing with the string and you'll be able to concentrate on what you should be doing. What they want you to do,
Yeah.
Your mind is so active.
But it's difficult for spirit, isn't it? Because they might think you're a fantastic healer.
Yeah.
You want to do clairvoyant. So first of all, they've got to convince you that healing is the way to go. So they've got to try and change your mindset. I mean, sometimes, like we were saying about choices within choices, we do it and we have to find out the hard way. But everything, what we were saying, Silas and me, is a balance. You've got to get balance right. But I was stunned at one time when he said, "Do you know, girl," he said, sometimes there can be too much light." And I said, "Well, how can there be too much light?" He said, "Well, think about it logically." This is Silas' view. He said, what happens if you're exposed to direct sunlight? What happens to your eyes? They get dazzled. He said, and people get dazzled very easily. Not dazzled, within that, but dazzled by promises of things.
Exactly.
And this is how he works as a book. We tend to take a thought and he'll give his take on things. We don't... what should I say? We don't try and influence people. We just want them to have a look at a different perspective. Perhaps look at things differently. Because people can get very blinkered in their views.
Oh, definitely.
Very set in their ways. You were talking about society, right? And they do put restrictions on people. Like you said, they perceive to be disabled, abnormal, but what I would like to know is what is normal.
Exactly.
You see, they put you in little pigeonholes with little labels on.
Yeah.
And people tend to think within the boxes.
Exactly, yes.
Now, what people like, we were talking about this in the book, what people like Da Vinci and Nostradamus and people like that did was think outside the boxes.
Yes. This
is what society now has got to start doing again, because everything has got so pigeonholed, that labels for everything, and people don't tend to look at people as being individuals.
No.
They're just gathered like herds and put into that. I mean, all right, there's some people with disabilities, but like you said, those people, there's like the 2 or 3 ways of looking at it. Some people don't consider themselves disabled.
Exactly, yeah.
Some people, have, like you said, had smother mothers and have been cosseted and find it very difficult. There's some others who would resent, this thing, and resent. They go through life with resentment. So, not everybody reacts to a certain situation in the same way.
Yes.
And people have got to, society as a general has got to realise this.
Yeah.
They haven't got to herd everyone together with a general perspective. The sooner they realise that human beings are unique. We're a blend of spirituality and humanity.
Exactly.
Right? Unfortunately for us, we live in a material world, which means that money is important. But if you think about it, in the spiritual world, there's no money, there's no time. There's but we are bound by earthly convention to embrace money to embrace
which in itself is an energy and an illusion. All that money is an energy of an exchange, which is presently in the world being abused. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. I mean, I like people to debate. That's what things are all about. That's how you get different people's perspective, is by debate, not by haranguing them or forcing your opinion on them, but by debate and listen. This would help world peace if people listen to one another. And listen to what people are saying and took things on board, then it would, the world would be a better place. I mean, because if you think about like medicines and things like that, and the majority of the way Mother Nature has provided all that. I mean, if you think of indigestion remedies, for an example, what's the first thing that's listed on the ingredients? Sodium bicarbonate soda, and yet they add a lot of fancy things to it and sell it for a fortune.
Exactly.
You found this in Kenya. They took us to Mombasa on a coach, and the driver said, "Look at the corners of the streets, and what do you see?" And we said, "Well, trees." No, look at the trees. And they said, "Well, they're trees." He said, "No." He said, "They are how the poor people, that is their medicine. And if they have an ailment, they go to a particular tree and they take the leaves or the bark and they do what they do with it. They boil it or chew it or whatever, And this is how the poorer people in the privileged countries live, whereas the people that ran the country could go to the pharmaceutical companies, they're making fortunes out of it.
I think it's a con in a sense, isn't it? I think that, from what I find, we're coming to a time where we as a species have to wake up and have to look at different ways of doing things, because I feel personally that the present ways in which we are doing things, the way that our government kind of exploits us and corporations exploit, as you just said, is just not working. And I find that, to me, it feels like it's getting worse. But what I've learned over the last couple of months is how to really focus my energy on, so I know about it, but yet I'm focusing my energy on trying to do my bit to live a better life and try and offer as much as I personally can. But it does feel that as if there's so much sort of information coming out now about the way things that run that people just didn't know before, that there has to be some sort of shift, there has to be a change, because we simply can't go on exploiting the way that we do. And, has Silas ever given you sort of his opinion on that, Eileen?
We were talking about shifts. The only way you're going to get shift is for enough people to stand up and be counted.
Yes.
Spirituality isn't a religion, it's a way of life.
Yes, agreed.
Right. And like I said, even spirituality, I mean, they've got their healers. I mean, I myself, I had a lump from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in the breast. I had psychic surgery and it was totally got removed. The powers that be in the hospitals won't have it, of course, but it was removed. I'm sorry about my voice.
No, your voice is very clear, actually.
But, they got the healers, they got the counsellors, they got the herbalists. I mean, a spiritual way of life. If you think of Jesus, all right? I don't personally believe, or Silas doesn't personally believe in a God. I believe in a God force. But if you think of Jesus, take Jesus as an example. He was a spiritualist. He, had messages from the spirit world. He healed. He brought people back from the dead. He was really the best advertisement that we could have. He was one of the true spiritual people.
Yes.
And I believe that people could learn a lot, from his lifestyle, the way he lives in a simplistic style. mean, there's been many great prophets, Moses, Elijah, people that's come in, away. But as we've grown up, what I personally have been told by Silas is that where we had the cave dwellers and people like that, and the drawings of the flying saucers, there was extraterrestrials in that time did visit the earth, and they did intermingle with the people on the earth.
Yeah,
right.
That's the research I've been doing as well.
So the thing is that that's how really we evolve. We evolve through the apes with the stance, but with the knowledge and everything, we evolved through the extraterrestrials. However, as they intermingled, right, then following through the generations, the bloodline diminished, and a lot of that knowledge was lost. Now, I believe that it's being brought back. I know a lot of people don't believe in crop circles, and they spend their lives trying to ridicule, and indeed they have succeeded in making some, the earth people. But I believe that a lot of the knowledge of an encryptment about it, if we spent less time trying to replicate them, and how did they do that, and more time trying to study the symbols and the symbolic knowledge contained within them, that we would perhaps once again find the key, or start to find the key, to how to live our lives in a more spiritual and more simple style.
That'd be a really interesting little project to do. I might even look into that.
That would be good. I'll be with you.
Are you interested in doing maybe some sort of because I'm doing a lot with video and YouTube and stuff at the moment. So what I might do is actually start doing some research on the symbols of crop circles, and perhaps we could do something together at some point on that.
Well, circles, you see, geometric circles are very important. I mean, the world is round. Circles are round. There's a circle of life from cradle to grave. Completion of one's, it's all like puzzles within puzzles. They mean different things. Like I've just given you 3 different meanings of a circle. You've got to put that in context. And the reason why it's so complex is because if if it was open to everybody, then the powers that be could use it. Not for the ill of mankind, but they could charge mankind, for that and to access that knowledge. What I think these people wanted to do was to make the knowledge accessible, because if you think about it, no pain, no gain. If you're not prepared to put in the spade work, nothing's worth having unless you've made an effort. You can't have everything handed to you on a plate.
Exactly.
And it's like the pyramid. There's more buried beneath the pyramids, and there's more knowledge to be accessed beneath the pyramids than there is on top of them, within them. But we've all this is what Silas has been doing now with the next book, and it's very, very interesting to read his perception on things as a whole. But that's what I would say is, I don't want to force or even he doesn't want to force his opinions on everybody else. However you look at something is a perception, right? So some people listening to this might think, oh my God, she's really lost the plot, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
We've had all different sorts on this show, so it's don't worry, there's plenty of people who will be listening who actually fundamentally agree with you.
When I was 8, I walked through myself.
Walked through yourself?
Yeah. In the spirituality, I actually walked through myself, which is an experience not accorded to many. And I could also, it was like a remote view, and I could literally, if I had an unpleasant experience, I could detach myself and practically remote view myself like an actor on the stage, which was a a bit, doesn't everybody do that? No,
Yeah.
they don't.
Sam
They
does that
do.
to me a lot. It's like
You know?
the way, there's certain things about Sam that she will just say, doesn't everyone do that? And I'm like, no.
No.
She did it up the mountain the other day with like how she walks and takes in the energy of the landscape. I'm like, well, I was told about that once when we met with a few friends of ours, but I know Sam was not there. And she just said, I've always done it. And like, I think because the way that Sam was brought up, she's kind of not let too much of society bog her down.
Yeah.
And so took on a lot of information naturally from. When you were talking there, I gotta say, it felt as if someone walked in. Did you feel anyone walk in? I don't know if it was actually your guide or not, but someone. It felt as if for a second, someone actually just walked into the room. So,
well, Silas and I have a very close bond anyway. I mean, and I didn't realise until recently that I had shared his life in Africa.
Really?
Yeah. So we have got a very close bond. I was one of the women. Well, originally I thought I was one of the women that he taught Christianity to. And it was only later on that he told me, because he didn't think I'd be able to cope with it. I've always felt, even in this lifetime, as if I didn't fit in. And what happened was I was thinking about this, and he came in and he said, I want to tell you I'm so sorry. And I said, well, what for? He said, your mother was actually the woman I taught Christianity to. But he said, we forged a relationship and you were the result. He said, but I couldn't acknowledge you because to acknowledge you would, heap, more trouble on your mother. He said, but my heart used to break when I used to see you. He said, and you were ostracised because you were obviously lighter in colour than the other children. So, actual fact, I found out I was his daughter.
Wow.
And he said, I wish you could acknowledge me as your dad. And something happened. I can't think what now. And I said, isn't that right, Dad? And all of a sudden I felt this tremendous warmth, as if I was absolutely wrapped in a hug.
Oh, bless.
So,
I lost a tear.
but it's only recently that came to light, because he didn't know how I would cope with the knowledge.
Should we take a short break for a cup of tea and then come back in about 5 minutes or so?
That'd be great. Yes, thank you.
Welcome back to Worlds Beyond. I'm here with Eileen and Colin, and we're actually discussing. In the break, we've been discussing some things about Eileen's new book, and different sort of perceptions on what's really going on in the world. And it seems to be kind of an ongoing theme with over the last couple of weeks with Worlds Beyond. So it really is. I think you guys really have we've sat there and done this at the right time, haven't we? But we were talking about a lot with young people, regarding a lot more young people I'm finding, especially with social networking and the internet and just generally working with people in general, a lot more young people are getting involved in sort of spiritual matters. And you were mentioning this was actually is becoming more covered in your newest book. Do you want to give us a bit of insight into that?
What Silas has told me is that a lot of these children, who are rainbow, crystal and indigo children, have been placed on the scrap heap by an education system that fails them. They're not being taught the literary skills. A lot of people blame the children for this. This isn't so. I think we've got to change as a society and embrace the needs of these children, because they are so insightful, and these children that they're placing on the scrap heap now will be the same children that will be expected to lead the world in a generation or so's time. They're not getting the equipment for it, but a lot of them have got a lot of insight and knowledge beyond their years, and are embracing spirituality because they're saying or thinking to themselves, is this all we've got to look forward to?
Yeah.
They don't get housing, they've got to wait ages for housing, they've got to fight for the benefits, which I understand is undergoing a change again. Their needs aren't being catered for at all, apart from the few, of course, that have been born with a silver spoon in their mouths, whose daddies can finance them. But the rest of them, they've got to go into a certain pecking order, which has been forced on them again by society and the social norms that everybody is supposed to conform to. It's like people that have got Asperger's and autism. You've got to fit into little boxes. Society seems so eager to label people. They're not looking at the broader picture. They're just, as I said, I believe in the previous half, they're just, looking within the boxes. I mean, you and I, we've got different perspectives on things.
Yes.
So as different people who are still labelled within the same category. So why lump them all together as autistic or Asperger's? Why not look at the individual? Why not cater for the individual? I was saying to you before, there are two sorts of intelligence. There's intelligence, which you get from reading books.
Yeah.
And then there's common sense, which is a sense of knowing. And I said, if I was stranded with somebody, I know which one I'd prefer to go with.
I think the most encouraging thing is, though, that when you visit spiritualist centres like we do, or we do a lot of psychic fairs and things, the numbers of younger people coming into those churches and to the psychic fairs looking for knowledge is gratifying. Because at one time, you used to go into a church, say 10 years ago, and you'd see people in their 40s, 50s, 60s and upwards as the main congregation. Now is a whole variety of people in there from cradle to the grave, basically. And I think that's how the world's going to move forward, is by educating the younger people.
I think there's because there's a responsibility on that as well, isn't it? Because again, like anything else, I find with spiritualism or any sort of a religion, sometimes the institution becomes more powerful than the actual message. And I think that, whereas if the education is failing people, I think that, there should be more encouragement for young people to actually try it their way. Because one of the massive roadblocks I had when starting down this road was, up to a point, I was taught by spirit. I was taught by my guides, by experience. And people tried to come into my life and say, no, you do it this way, or you do it my way. And it just never worked for me. And until I actually done it my own way and trusted myself and trusted what spirit were telling me, that's when things started to work and happen for me. And I felt that people coming in, the people I trusted to come in and said, you got to do it this way, in a sense, sent me, as we were about to go in down different roads, sent me down different roads. And I kind of thought to myself at one point, is this me? Is this what I want? Or is this what's kind of been programmed into me? Do you get me?
Yeah.
And I think that how do you find, if you were a young person then, looking for this sort of knowledge, put yourself in the shoes of the young person going into this sort of centre or psychic fair, what do you say to them?
Well, I think what has happened is twofold. We were saying about the churches a little bit earlier. When people are thinking to themselves, we can't go on like this, and they're looking for a meaning to life. They're looking for direction. And this is what I'm hoping that the books that I write is somehow giving them. But also, I find that the spiritualist church, unlike the conventional churches, move with the times. I mean, if you go into a conventional church, it's usually dark, cold, the hymns are outdated, and they're breathing like fire and brimstone. And you go into a spiritualist church where it's light and airy, the songs are modern, you get a welcome and you're encouraged. I think it's important today for the youngsters to get encouragement.
Yes.
Right? People don't tend to encourage youngsters. But they've got to learn, you know, to untap their potential. And like I said, many of them are very highly evolved creatures. Colin, I tell you that even in his own experience, I mean, where I was saying earlier about my childhood, I can go off and you'll be sat there and I'm staring into what he believes is space, and you say to me, Earth to Eileen, but it's the communication. And the more we're learning about it, the more evolved. It's like when you get a skill, spirituality or anything else, right, within life, riding a bike, for instance, you either use it or you lose it. Now, if these children, they're highly evolved, you know, they might seem to their teachers as if they're daydreaming and very often be told off for it. But in actual fact, they're probably having a communication with spirit. But they're not encouraged to do this. I mean, from an early age, again, society, you know, you're meant to do this, you're meant to do that. I mean, I can't remember the poet that said it, but what is this life full of care? We have no time to stand and stare. You know, we've got no time to appreciate things.
Yeah.
You know, there's got to be, people got to have a structure. They got to have a timetable. They're like hamsters on a little treadmill. Yeah. And I'm going off on a tangent now.
But
so
I find that, though, is like the more that I try and make plans, the more spirit have other ideas, and it's kind of it was funny actually, because when we did the show, I don't know if you've listened to previous shows that we've done.
No.
We did one with I'll have to send them over to you. I'll send you a link to the YouTube channel if you like.
Yeah, it'd be great.
We did one with I was so inspired, and the guys have become kind of my friends now, or I've become friendly with them, especially a good couple of them we've talked to quite a few times, which we did an interview with guys from the Art of Modern Wizardry. And it was all about modern wizardry, and it was a way of looking at spirituality in a philosophical sense. And one of the kind of book that was written by the guy who started it all off was called The Time Workshops, and I'm reading it at the moment. And so he actually mentions in the interview about the book, and I said, I'll pick a copy up now then. I just felt as if it was the right thing for me to read at the right time. And he said, right, when you open up, take the book and just open to a page and read the first lines you're drawn to, just read them and it'll mean something. So I opened the book and it just said, hand plans upstairs and follow your feet. And I find that, you know, since moving to Park, that I've become less driven by time. There's not a clock in this house, and when I talked about the channeled reading that we did when Sam was going through the thing with Bagel last year, remember we talked about in part 1?
Yeah.
A lot of it was about space and time. You will learn about space and time. And I'm like thinking, well, at the time, you know, I was thinking, what the hell is this? This is a load of crap. You know, I've obviously gone off on a tangent here. I was writing or something, you know, I doubted it. But now it made sense because I've actually talking to people and reading about the concept of time, how time is perceived, how it all works and all this sort of stuff. And it's really difficult, it's really simple, but because it's so simple sometimes I find it difficult to understand because my mind is so used to overcomplicating everything. And I find that now I work when I feel compelled to work. I rest when I feel compelled. I'm not sort of driven by time. I'm kind of more driven by how my body wants to function. Don't get me wrong, I probably work more than I don't work because I really enjoy what I'm doing and really having fun with it. And it's really, you know, again, it doesn't earn me a great deal of money, but it's like even things like this, you know.
But job satisfaction is a lot better than money. I know we've got to have a certain amount of it because we live in the material world. You know, whereas in spirit there's no money, there's no time. But I know we have got these values, unfortunately, that we've got to work to earn money, you know, to provide. This is why, as I said earlier on, some mediums, or perhaps the majority, don't come into it until they're older, for twofold, because A, they've got to provide, but B, life is full of lessons. And, you know, you can only get your lessons at various stages of your life. I mean, when you settle, the pain of a breakup of a relationship, maybe losing your home, and the insecurity and the worry that brings, the issues with children, with drugs and drink and things like that. You only get those when you get to a certain age. And therefore, to my mind, mediumship and spirituality is about helping people, through a maze, really, because we all usually have the same problems, and how you deal with it is a matter of perception. But what I like, it's not only about proof of survival, there's also got to be an empathy. And this is what, more than proof of survival, is what I like to give. After every reading, I tend to ask people if there's anything they want to ask me, or anything I can help them with. And then, you know, as I said, because to me, yes, I've got to earn a certain amount, because like everybody else, I've got to eat. But I've also got a responsibility to the people I read for, to ensure, hopefully, that they feel better when they leave the seat opposite me than they did when they sat down. And that, to me, is very important. To me, that's what true spirituality is all about.
And I think it's all about, to me, bringing the sort of creative element into it, and bringing this sort of, you know, sit down, actually, that conversational element. And to me, it feels like if I can create something that actually people can refer to and it helps them, even if it's just like me sitting talking about my experiences, you know, like for me, it's very similar to the way that what it might be for you with writing. And I think that it's very strange how these sort of lessons come to you. And I've kind of really lost my train of thought now. What were we talking about?
We were talking about hamsters on treadmills, and how.
Right. Yeah, it's strange how for me it's all sort of broke down, and I kind of almost learning a different way to approach my life. And to do that, you know, perhaps, hopefully I can help that, pass that on to other people, and maybe they will see some of the benefits that I felt I've had, or perhaps I might learn something from them. It's kind of an exchange, isn't it?
You never stop learning. No. You never stop learning. The person that says they know everything is an absolute...
crazy person.
Exactly, yes. I was going to say something a bit stronger, but you saved me from myself. Yeah.
Can I ask for the benefit of people listening, because I don't know much about it. You mentioned indigo, crystal, rainbow children. Well, what is that all about?
It's about the way Silas looks at it is it's like the recyclement of souls. I know there's other ways, you know, that people talk about energies and with this, but indigo, it's all like mainly the chakras as well. There's the indigo, which is, you know, very evolved.
The crown.
Yeah, the crown. The crystal children, that way is like visionaries, crystal clear. That's the way he looks at it.
So obviously would be an amalgamation.
The rainbow is to me is like all aspects of spirituality. You know, spirituality, right? I always say, like, I'm a writer. Colin used to be a healer. It's all categories, and people are, people have different attributes, different skills, but there's also like a recyclement of souls. And what they do, it's like an evolution. People have so many lifetimes. I'm sure you've heard of reincarnation. Yes. And they reincarnate either to learn lessons or maybe to right wrongs or, difference of perceptions. Once they've learnt or that they need to, they're free to either come back again if they wish, or they can go on to other dimensions. Silas said when he's finished with me, he wants to go on to other dimensions and learn other things. But, the further along the evolutionary field you get, the more lessons you learn and the more spirituality you absorb, then the more evolved you become. It's like a collective sense of consciousness, of knowing. I find it very difficult to explain, but sometimes you'll know who's on the end of a phone before you pick it up.
Yeah, I get that.
It's like it's like you've always known these things. Yeah. Because what we were saying is in the second book, which was Further Revelations of Silas, a Spirit Guide, we did a poem that came from the show that Colin did about a young boy who'd been struck by lightning, and his consciousness, even though he resided still in the spirit world, his consciousness was in the material. No, though he lived here, his consciousness now was spent in the spirit world, and he was telling us about how this can be and how the memory is like a black box. We did a philosophy on it after, and he likened the human being to a computer. You've got memory, but I wish I had the book in front of me. Did you say you had the copy?
I have.
So
I'll go and have a look now, and I'm going to have a look now. They've actually given that to me as well. They've given that to me about in 2009. I was actually walking down to Treorchy, and they gave the human consciousness as a computer, where the memory is what makes things.
But because you can't take the brain back with you,
yeah,
because it's a human organ. So actually, everything is in the mind, and what happens is you get so full of information, you can't possibly hold it all. You get bombarded with bits of information, and it gets consigned to memory banks. If you need to recall that information, it's dredged back up. But it was an interesting piece of philosophy and a very moving poem that Silas wrote about that.
I'll go and find it now. We'll take a short break, and I'll go and find the poem now, shall I?
If you like, yes, that'd be good.
Welcome back to Worlds Beyond. We're on part 3. We're still here with Colin and Eileen, and we're talking a broad array of subjects today, most of which are going to be covered in Eileen's new book. What is the book going to be called, or can you not release the title?
The Teaching of Silas and Friends Through the Sands of Time.
The Teaching of Silas and Friends Through the Sands of Time. When do you know when it's out?
We're aiming for next year, but he said because it's so complex, I got dual with the 2 guides. It's got to be spot on, and he's a pernickety person at the best of times. So we're aiming for the middle of next year.
Oh, fantastic! Well, if you don't mind, we're going to have a look into the poem of which we were talking about. But could we, to sort of round off the show then, can we talk then a little bit about sort of your relationship with Silas and maybe the writing process? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Excellent. So we've actually got, you can get 3 of Eileen's books on Amazon. The first one is, what was the first one called?
Spiritual food for thought.
Spiritual food for thought, and you have further revelations from Silas.
A spirit guide.
And
pearls
then
of
pearls
wisdom.
of wisdom.
Yeah. Right, do you want the philosophy as well?
Yeah, if you'd like to read it, that would be fantastic.
Right, one of the hardest things anyone will have to do in life is to take the decision to turn off the life support machine of a loved one. The following poem channeled by me through Silas was, without doubt, one of the most emotional I have received to date. It was written from the perspective of the person who is shortly to return home to the land of spirit, and tries to describe the differences between the humanistic and spiritualistic characteristics which collectively form a human being. The whir of the machine keeping me alive, ensuring for now, on the earth I survive. I know I am growing progressively weaker. My quality of life grows increasingly bleaker. Unable to stand, unable to talk, unable to eat, unable to walk. Loved ones at the end of my bed do grieve. I'm sure they already know that I have to leave. They think that I am unable to hear the terms of endearment they utter so clear. I wish I could reach out and touch those faces that I love so much. But more and more of my reality is spent in the land of spirituality. The doctor has asked to see them. I know what he will say. It's time to switch off the machine and send me on my way. And so, on the morrow, it has been decided that my spirit from my body will be divided. From their faces I can tell they've come to bid me a fond farewell, taking their leave, eyes filled with tears, while I address my many fears. Will my passing be filled with ease, finding leaping across the divide a breeze? This is my most fervent hope, so my loved ones find it easier to cope. I do not wish to cause them further pain. My head's filled with thoughts that I cannot explain. Once again to the spirit world I roam, to tell them that I'll soon be home. Waking in the morning gloom, my relatives have filled the room. They know the deed must be done, but no one wants to be the one to flip the switch that will send me on my way to the dawn of a brand new day. So as the doctor crosses the floor, I catch a movement by the door. My mum's in the room, arms stretched wide. She crosses the room to be at my side, and, with a gentle little cough, the doctor switches the machine off. Come, says Mum, let's be on our way, for you've many adjustments to make this day. My breathing falters, then I'm still. I cross with purpose and free will. So don't grieve because from your life I've gone. In the spirit world I carry on.
I was in tears really listening to that. You should do like public readings of your poetry and stuff. That'd be awesome. You've got a lovely voice for it.
Well, I've always said that, that she should be doing this more, But I think the other thing it shows in that is that very often with clairvoyance, people often ask, well, where does it come from? And I think people are passing, do go to the spirit world back and forth for quite a while. And they can, when you're doing a reading or clairvoyant reading, they give you information that nobody else could know. No way they could do on earth of how they passed, how many people were in the room at the time, and how everything sort of evolved and what happened. I think that poem sums everything up quite nicely.
I think it was one of the first poems I actually read,
yeah.
Because I was drawn to that book first, and I kind of, me being me, wanted to read the first one first and the second one second. It's like, no, that will have more relevance for you. Because I did, after we met first, I did actually read the book, and it was one of those books I kind of, it really did it resonated with me. And it's funny actually how different sort of books can come at you at different times, and really, Do you know what? Slightly shamefully, I'd forgotten how much it resonated with me when I originally read it until today, because I see you move on and whatnot. But it was like, I remember reading it now and kind of recall the information, just how I felt and actually how it gave me comfort on where to go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, because I remember I did actually write, I wrote a review for you, didn't I, which you can find, well, you could find on spiritualworlds.co.uk, but unfortunately at this present moment in time, the website is down. Due to a slight problem with our hosting company, which our hosting company is doing extremely well to try and sort out. They're doing fantastic. So, in order to round the interview off, I thought I would like to talk a little bit about your relationship with Silas, as in, it kind of, if you don't mind, to kind of put it into terms that people who maybe haven't had this experience can understand, and sort of how you actually talk to him. Do you hear him? When you channel, what happens? So what kind of experience?
The thoughts. It's almost like it's thought transference. Right. It's just the thoughts are placed into my head, and I've got to write them. Very, very rarely does he speak to me, and it's usually if I've failed to grasp something, and I'm in for a little bit of a telling off, because I'm not hitting the spot. But normally it's just thought transference, and the reason for this is he took me up to the spirit world with him, and I sat in on a lecture. And
how did you experience that? Was that in a dream, or was that just in some sort of trance? Or
it was almost like a meditation. I was in a meditation, and then in 1 minute then I was in this, it was almost like an amphitheatre, like you see them on telly with the 3 sets of seats.
I know, yeah.
Right. And the tutor was almost like a hologram, and he was talking, I can't remember what about now, because this experience was so profound. And I went to ask a question, and Silas pointed at me, almost put his fingers against my lips and pointed to my head. And I thought of the question, and the answer came back. And, I said to Silas after, well, why do they do this? And he said, because, he said, on the earth world, sometimes you can ask a question, or you're inhibited from asking a question because you don't want to look stupid in front of people, or you might ask an intelligent question and people might think you're a know-it-all or a swot. This way everybody learns at their own rate, and everybody learns at their own pace. The spirit world is such that there's no differentiation. Everybody is totally equal. And I will give you, if you don't mind, because I think that poem's a bit emotional, I will give you another one out of there which will prove that fact later on to round the show off.
Okay.
But another profound experience I had with him, we were talking about trust. And again in meditation, I was drawn to the edge of this, almost like a lake. And there was a swan, like the 2 sides of a swan where you go down you sit in it and you glide down the river. It was like that, but this swan was real. It was pink, and I could almost feel the feathers. And we went down this river, and I was, drizzling with my fingers towards the edge of the bank, like you do. And we walked. We got out, and of course he's frail, so he walks with a stick. So we started to walk up this hill, and there was this massive, massive waterfall. We walked so far up, and he got tired, so he grabbed my hand, and we rose to the top. And we were looking at it, and it was quite a drop down. And he was looking at me, and he said, "Now jump." Yeah, right? You must be joking. You think I'm going to jump from here? So anyway, I wasn't expecting it. All of a sudden, I had a push. And then all of a sudden he was underneath me and bringing me back up. And he did that 2 or 3 times, and he said, right, now you've got to do it yourself. You have got to do it yourself. You've got to learn to trust. And there was me, you know what you're like when you're creeping towards the end or something. Creeping towards, toes curled.
Could you actually feel your toes?
Yeah.
Wow.
Bending forward, and I went down, he brought me back up, and then he held my hand. He said, now we'll go down together, which is how we're meant to be. And we went down, I could feel the waterfall on my face, the water on my face. It was absolutely stunning meditation and was so profound. And you said, how have I learnt to trust him? That was how I learnt to trust him. And he said to me, I have always got your back. Remember that. I have always got your back. And of course, in the light now of events, knowing that he was my father in that lifetime, the words have taken on a renewed poignance. He has always got my back, always there for me.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask another question, but
Why not?
It's just completely deleted it from my mind. How has it now obviously affected the relationship now you've got this new guide coming in with this book?
It hasn't, because the new guide was necessary. As I said to you, Silas was Victorian in his manner, Victorian in his language, and Victorian in his style. We needed to make the books appeal to these amazing children who've got so much abundance of energy, and the vision. It's the vision with these children that they've got. The world will evolve with them, make no mistake about that. He's told me that. There will be a massive shift.
Would that be like in my lifetime or our lifetimes, do you think?
Not in my lifetime, definitely. I don't know how probably I would say towards the grandchildren age. But you're already starting that shift. You realise that, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, we're like the old school now. Our times now is limited, but you are now carrying on the mantle. Each generation, each subsequent generation, will evolve. Each subsequent generation will bring a new shift, and I hope a more empathetic, sympathetic, and spiritual change. To be in touch with yourself. I'm hoping the material world will cease. I know it will never totally cease. I know money will always be necessary here, but I hope it will be more irrelevant as time goes on and people get in touch with themselves and go back to the roots. Because we're laughing now. We're talking about, say, organic food. Now, in the early days, everything was organic until they started to spray pesticides and insecticides on it. And now we're talking, they charge the earth for natural food, which other people took for granted. And this is what I'm hoping for the world to come, that they will go back to basics, that they will be in tune with themselves, and that above all they will be happy and peaceful. There will be peace in their time.
I think that is to be perfectly honest, I think that's a lovely conclusion to end this on. So shall we close out with the poem that you were going to read?
I know it's about Elvis. It was funny actually, and you will laugh. I'm hoping to give people a bit of amusement and show that although spirit can be serious, they've also got their their fun side. Right. Elvis is given a concert up here. People come for far and near. Whether or not to hear his rich voice, they all enjoy freedom of choice. Up here he is free to go anywhere of his choosing. When he left the earth plane, he knew he would be losing the gilded prison in which he was encased. Daily in its rooms up and down he paced. If he dared to go out, he was mocked and of basic human rights he was robbed. Being the king of rock and roll exacted from him a heavy toll, and for all his worldly wealth he didn't enjoy the best of health. The drugs he took made him a parody of the great young man he used to be. He became so out of touch with his fans who loved him oh so much. The being who had so much to give simply lost the will to live. Becoming bloated he hid away, often substituting night for day. Now he has come home, this has been redressed. Back to normality he has regressed. There are, you see, no drugs appear, and his mind once again is absolutely clear. His beloved parents once again his life share. He flourishes happily in their tender care, knowing that never again will he be separated from their company. And this once humble little boy sings again for pure joy, curling his lips and swivelling his hips with exaggerated emphasis. But here there are no jealousies amongst our varied celebrities. They are all quite happy to be in each other's company, where each one supports the other, attending the concerts given by their brother. There's no Elvis has left the building, for he's now a common man, who takes the time and trouble to talk to every fan. So Elvis has given a concert, and I do so want to attend. I must now go and get ready, so a fond adieu, my friend.
Was that from Silas? That was brilliant.
So I hope I've left you on an uplifting feature, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Eileen, Colin, thank you very much for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
It's been fantastic, and we'd hope to have you back soon.
I'm sure, yes.
That would be lovely.
Now the sat nav has found you.
Don't be strangers, because there'll be other projects as well, which hopefully we can work together on.
Would be
That
good.
would be good, yeah.
It is. And thank you very, very much.
Okay.
You've been listening to Worlds Beyond. I'm Jared Walters on Ronda Radio. Also, you can check out previous shows on our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/spiritual worlds. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll see you next week.